Hello.
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 Welcome to Hugo Girl.
Thank you.
We are reading all of the Hugo Award-winning novels in this podcast, and we are, 2 years plus into it?
Mm-hmm.
Just trucking right along. This episode is going to be about China Miéville's The City in the City. This novel won the Locus Award for Best Fantasy Novel, the Arthur C. Clarke Award, the World Fantasy Award, the BSFA Award, and the Kitschy's Red Tentacle, tied for the 2010 Hugo Award for Best Novel, and was nominated for Nebula Award and John W. Campbell Memorial Award for Best Science Fiction Novel, so lots of people love this book.
What did it tie with? Our favorite book?
The Wind-Up Girl.
On that subject, I have a quick corrections corner.
Oh.
One of our followers rightly pointed out that when we did our Wind-Up Girl episode, I said the author's name wrong. Amy had it right. And I did what wrong people often do and was like, no, I think I know what that is. And I mispronounced it. And so she pointed that out. So thank you to her. And I should just say that it's Baci Galuppi is how he says it. And he also went on to say that he always thought it meant kiss of the wolf in Italian. But one of his Italian readers wrote to him and told him that it actually means more along the lines of infested with wolves.
Oh, no.
And that was from the author himself. I found audio of him talking about his name and pronouncing it so I could be sure that I got it right. So that is how you say his name. And that's my correction.
Correction corner done.
That reminds me. So my last name, Zapel, is Polish. It is
I'm sorry, it's Zapal.
No, Zappel. Nobody ever gets it right. It doesn't make any linguistic sense. But so it's my Polish step-grandfather's last name. It's not my biological last name. But when we were in law school at UGA, we had a Polish exchange student. And he said that my name was Zapal.
Ooh.
And that it means fire or lighter.
Okay.
And I was like, I did not know any of this. So I'm not going to change the way that I based my identity around how I pronounce it, though. So
No.
Rhymes with staple.
So what did he say it was?
Zapal.
Zapal.
Not like a robot, but I can't do the intonation the same way.
Yeah.
But it was like a different vowel. I don't know.
That's fun.
But I was like, well.
What's your biological last name?
Tautkus.
Huh.
Tautkus. My actual grandfather is...
A taut kiss?
A Tautkus.
The
Yeah.
least enticing of kisses.
My actual...
Maybe it actually just means infested with kisses.
My actual paternal grandfather was born in Lithuania. So.
My last name used to have an umlaut once upon a time.
Saley.
I feel like everyone can know all your security questions now.
There's no umlaut in my security
I don't
answers.
use my last name, so there you go.
Oh, can I read a comment, the last review that we got?
Oh, yeah, please.
Yeah.
Some housekeeping.
Yeah. So we got a new review. And
Laurie's whole month has been made.
if you listen, you know that it makes my whole month. And I've read it 200 times. And here's the thing. Apple Podcasts took a big dump several weeks ago, and it had this new format rollout, and our logo was all messed up, which some people have mentioned. I've been trying to fix it, and when you sign into Apple Podcasts, it's just oh, we're setting up your account. Never mind how long we've had one. And anyway, it's not just us. There are other podcasts having the problem, and I wash my hands of it, whatever. But this review is not showing on Apple Podcasts. So I don't know how they got it, but Chartable is a third-party service that sends us emails when we get new reviews, and they sent it via Apple Podcasts, but you can't see it there. So I feel like it's extra important to read it here. So it's from a nice friend, Emmanuel, and he's Canadian. We have a lot of Canadian friends.
Hi, Emmanuel.
Yeah. And it says, this is one of the few sci-fi novel podcasts I actually enjoy on a regular basis. The hostesses have funny, informal, but smart and relevant discussion about Hugo-winning books. I always learn something while having a good laugh with them. They complete each other quite well. Aww. Voice their opinions in good humor and all have very different appreciations of the different books, which I enjoy. Also, as a man, I very much enjoy and appreciate listening to this all-women podcast. Listening to this podcast does feel like having a discussion among friends.
Cute.
That's so nice. That's what we're going for, you know?
How do we find all the nice men?
I was about to say, we talk frequently about how we found all the nice men on the internet and they listen to us.
It's going to happen one day. We're going to get some angry dude, but...
I want it so we can eviscerate him. But we don't ever get it. It's just nice guys.
I don't want it. I like nice men.
I do. I love all our nice men.
So
They're
welcome.
nice.
Welcome, and thank you he sent us that nice email as well. So thank you for your nice email and your nice review.
Yeah, so that was nice. Keep writing the reviews for Lori.
Yes, thank you.
Keep being nice men. Y'all are nice men and we like you.
All right, I'm going to try and summarize this plot.
It's a hard one.
It is and it isn't. So okay.
Like the city and the city.
True. It is and it isn't. All right. So let's get started. A woman is found murdered in the city of Basel, and it's up to Detective Theodore Borlú to figure out the case. This hard-boiled setting is complicated by the fact that Basel and its sister city, Ulcoma, have a special relationship, and that they're, I think, occupying the same space. Basel is characterized as run-down, decrepit, in a Soviet bloc-era way, while Ulcoma is sleek metal and glass. Citizens of each have to unsee the other city, or they'll get in trouble with a shadowy, oft-mythologized group called Breach, which is also a verb. Theodore ends up traveling to Ulcoma eventually to work with the detective there and interviews the missing girl, Mihalia Gary's colleagues. She was an American PhD student studying archaeology that became embroiled in the dense political turmoil of Ulcoma and Basel. I won't give away the ending in case you haven't watched it, but it's complicated.
Read it.
So,
Haley, did you just watch the
She
show?
said watched it.
I did say it, but I haven't watched it.
She watched the movie.
I didn't. I wish that I did, but I didn't. They haven't read it. You know what I mean.
I know,
We're
it
just
was
messing with
funny.
you.
Yeah. So, that was the plot summary. Do you want to add anything? There's a lot to this book, but
No,
I
I think we'll get to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm going to spoil. I have a lot of complaints that will
I think
definitely
we have to spoil it. Yeah.
spoil it and spoil it.
Well, okay. Y'all spoil it then.
Okay.
If you want or not. Okay. Or we can go straight
Well, I
to
don't think
Well, I
the
think we'll
plot
get to
summary
it.
needs
Okay.
it. I just want to.
Yeah, that's basically what it is.
Yeah, yeah.
It's a detective
It's
novel.
a detective novel.
And there's two cities. We don't know why they're the way they are, but it's weird. Okay. Okay. Goodreads. Goodies from Goodreads. So I spent a lot of time on Goodreads, and the vast majority of people like this book. I sorted by the 1-star reviews just to get, some funny things. Nothing funny.
I know.
Oh, I have some good ones.
People either loved it, and that's great, or they I didn't understand it, and they quit reading it, which is not fun to read.
Yeah.
Most of the negative reviews were exactly how I felt about it, where I was like, I didn't understand what was going on. There was at once too much explanation and not enough.
Yeah.
It was boring, didn't finish, which I would have not finished it.
I found one that kind of resonated with me. So overall, there's nothing really super objectionable about the book, I think, and people tend to either rave about it or not dig it. But my favorite review was from Margaret Killjoy because it most closely represented my feelings. My biggest problem is with the ending. I find the protagonist sort of lackluster, a simple vessel that experiences the world around himself, occasionally being clever when it suits the plot. But the sheer objectivity is, in its way, agonizing. And I think that's what I most agree with. Is it's a very objective book. It's like almost, this would be a great fiction book for a nonfiction lover, I feel like.
Yes, a review I read said that it felt like reading a travel guide. and that's kind of true. It's like he really wanted to describe the cities and describe the political things that were going on and like people's reaction to them, tourists and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
I have a couple of reviews,
Please
briefly.
enlighten.
So the first one is a review from a user named Breakdown, and I'm not going to read the review, but you know how in Goodreads you can arrange your books by virtual shelves? Breakdown has this book shelved on garbage. And then the other one, I'm going to read the review first and then tell you the reviewer's name. It says, just couldn't get into it. Lots of profanity. And that review is by Karen.
Wait, I don't remember any profanity. Like, what words?
They
said
say
some.
fuck a lot.
They said
I didn't
some, yeah.
remember it either, but then when I was flipping
Really?
back through to take notes, they're dropping
We're
F-bombs
fallen
a lot.
women, so we wouldn't notice.
Yeah, it doesn't register with me.
I had a couple. I read. I will mention that N.K. Jemisin liked it in 2012.
I saw that her little review. She's like, this is interesting.
She said she was kind of bored, but that's okay. Yeah. This is kind of goes what we were saying a minute ago. This user named Light Reads on Goodreads gave it 3 stars and said, "What a beautiful book. Shame it had no soul."
Yes.
And then Borbality gave it 2 stars and said, "I'm not gonna read the whole review, but just chunks of it. If a professor in a made-up city walks across an arbitrary border, does anyone care?"
Oh, I saw that one.
He said, "I need to know why it matters if someone looks at a stupid building across the street rather than unsees it, as the book so eye-rollingly employs. As it stands, it's like Mom's 'because I said so' when you ask why you can't wear your Spider-Man underwear on your head." One of the only parts I liked was when a foreigner told the narrator detective how stupid it all was. And there were some lame made-up words that made me want to barf, like doppelganger.
Doppelganger.
One of the reviews I saw on Amazon was by a user that did not have a username, which was unfortunate. It was like Amazon customer or something like that. But the review's sole text was, "This story is a bumbleclot." And so I had to look that up because I had never heard that word before.
That's like me with every book or every word in this book.
And apparently, bumbleclot is sort of a mix or a takeoff on a Jamaican word that is a term for a sanitary napkin or bathroom wipe.
Oh, dear.
So I thought that was pretty great.
I was intrigued by the people that were like, I read one on Goodreads that was like 6 stars. This is the best book I've ever read. And I was just like, I don't get it. Like, it's kind of a cool idea, but it's like Amy just said, like, I want to know why. Otherwise, I won't believe it.
This was one I was talking about a minute ago. This is Alok, I think is the name on Goodreads, gave it 3 stars. He said, future self, here's a reminder that you started reading this book because of this tweet from Edward S. Levy, I guess, on October 15th, 2020. Loved that chapter in The City and the City where Bezel and Ulcoma host simultaneous town halls. I don't know why that was funny to me. And he said 2 stars for being a subpar police procedural, plus an extra star for the intriguing, although sometimes silly premise. There's a lot of telling and not showing, but I didn't mind it. It was like reading a travel guide.
It's hard, though, because I love to read travel guides. Because they're like, here's a great thing about the city. Here's a cool thing to do. This was just like, guys, you can't see the thing.
Well, yeah, you can't look at the cool
You can't
stuff.
look at it.
I was thinking about when we read Bloodchild by Octavia Butler, and we're just sort of like dropped in on this planet, and we don't really know why the people are there, how they have this symbiotic relationship with their insectoid benefactors / users. But it's still like so interesting and you want to read it. And here I was like, I don't have the backstory and I can't live without it.
Same. Yeah. I mean, I found myself thinking about physics a lot. I was like, 2 places cannot occupy the same space.
I can't figure out.
They do.
I can't figure out if they actually somehow magically, in defiance of physics as we understand them, actually occupy the same space. Or if it's just like, my house is in Bezel and my neighbor's house is in Ulcoma, and when I walk past it, I'm supposed to avert my eyes.
It's that second one.
It's the second one?
Yeah.
But how do you know that, though?
Well, I don't know. I've read it twice, and so I think I just absorbed some explanations in there.
And I read about it, and the idea is great. It's a very... Yeah. I think this book is a little bit heavy-handed, but like, you know, the way that you step over a homeless person on the street, you're not seeing them.
That's exactly the example I was going to use.
And I get that, but like, I don't get this.
Well... And it's like, I would think that it's about how the absurdity of borders and boundaries. I mean, it is, it is silly. And it is, like I think a lot of science fiction does. It takes a thing that we do, or speculative fiction, I guess, in this case, and, you know, carries it out.
New weird.
It carries it out to like an absurd conclusion. But this is too much. And then like the Breach are mysterious. So I thought that the Breach were like aliens or something, but it seems like they're actually just people. And so then I was like, no one would care this much about this.
Well, how do they know too? Like, there's got to be some sort of alien perspective. If you can, like, if a child goes and picks up a doll that a Ulcoman dropped, like, how do they know that? Is it just cameras?
It sounds like they have a lot of people just guarding, but there's some things they won't care about. Like if a child picks up a doll, like they're not gonna bust out on a 10-year-old, you know.
I feel like there has to be something a little more supernatural about it.
They kept saying Avatar when he goes into Breach.
Yeah.
And so I was like, is that like a computer thing?
And then there was a part where Borlú talks about crossing the membrane between Bezel and Ulcoma, and that made me think there's some supernatural aspect or some alien aspect, or I don't know, some gross topic.
Hopefully there
aspect.
I don't know. I just read it all very on his face, and I think I think it's what you were saying a minute ago, Lori. It's just taking the idea that we've all agreed about political borders and country borders, and just expanding that to be some crazy, like applying it to a place where it's actually like interwoven, but you still have to respect the borders. I don't know. That's how I read. And when he says membrane, I think I read that too. I think I read it as just being metaphorical, but
yeah, I mean, I do think that, and a lot of, so I read reviews of the TV show as well. It's like a limited series, and I think if you could see it, it might be more effective. Mm-hmm. Because like the clip that I watched from the show, like it's very like green gray saturated for Bezel, and then Ulcoma's like stark blue and white and dark skyscraper, right? And I think that'd be cool to see, and I think visually you can make the metaphor like resonate emotionally. Mm-hmm. But in the book, I was just like, okay, you have to unsee. And then so I kept thinking about this unsee term, which is very Orwellian in a lot of ways, It's very sci-fi. But it basically just means to ignore, but that would be a less effective neologism, I guess. Because is it really unseeing? Because you can't unsee a stimulus. Like your brain registers.
Well, I think that's the point. It's like they've all agreed that this thing that is impossible is what they are all doing, even though they're not doing it, right? But it's like this, it's just this mutual agreement that this is what's happening, that you are officially unseeing this thing that crossed your path, right? It's like, and it's as stupid as everybody agreeing that there's a border somewhere where the land is not different past one point to another, but we agree there's a different country there now. Like, it's kind of that idea just sort of writ large. But I agree, he has to spend a lot of time explaining it. So I think it does probably lend itself better to a visual medium.
And I would love just like a little bit of a reason. Like at least with the border, it's like, well, this is where France ends and Germany begins.
Yeah, but that wasn't always where France began and Germany ended. You know, it's sort of a development over political, like when they decided to carve out Pakistan out of India, right? It's like suddenly there's this new country there, and we all now have to agree there's a new country there, even though the day before there was not.
I guess it's the question of physics for me. I'm just like, they talk about cleaving, which is like the event that maybe caused it, but cleaving means to join together and to separate. So that was an interesting, like, little weird.
Thing. And I would imagine he used that word purposefully.
Oh, for sure, for sure.
He's very good at words. Have you ever read Embassy Town?
I have read Embassy Town.
Yeah,
I liked it.
Yeah, I liked Embassy Town as well.
And I mean, it's all about alien grammar.
Well, so I feel like this book was written in alien grammar.
Yeah,
the syntax is so strange.
He loves language. So
So I texted Lori about this because, like, I write for a living, and my job is to make things clearer for the most part from non-writers. And, like, this book is written in a way that I think it's really best served to be read out loud. But here's an example of a sentence that, like, because I found myself rereading sentences over and over and over again. But this sentence: past and under the stretches of facade where caryatids looked at least somewhat like figures from beige history, towards where they were all common, into the hall itself, where a wide road overlit by windows and gray lights was sighted at the vision by a long line of pedestrians seeing day entry. It's just, it doesn't read like English.
Yeah. There is a lot of, like, you would expect a clause to be in the opposite order of the way that it is. And then there was one sentence that I got very frustrated with and had to read out loud, and I read it aloud to Kevin, and he pursed his lips as though it were very easy to understand. It had 5 commas in it. Yeah. 5 commas in one sentence. I mean, I know he's doing it on purpose. It's not accidental, but I found it frustrating. And the dialogue also I found frustrating, so I took down.
He does a lot of, like,
so much interruption.
Which is very, like, natural. Like, because when I try to transcribe actual text, like, people talk like that, for sure.
Yeah, there was a place where if you heard it, or, like, we were watching a movie or something, it would make sense. But on the page, look, I'm sorry about, jumping in like that. I just think we need protocols. I don't want you to think, I appreciate that. All right, no worries. I was looking at it, and I was like,
I think it happens way more often. So when Theodore goes to Ulcoma and hooks up with Dot, the Ulcoman police guy, I feel like he does, like, and that what you read, I think, is between them.
Yes.
And I think it happens way more between them than it does between, like, when he's in Beshel, I don't think it happens nearly as much. And so I think he's trying to, like, sort of get across, like, a language barrier, a cultural barrier, and a general, like, discomfort these guys have with each other.
I totally agree with you. Yeah. I just don't find it pleasurable to read.
It's very clever.
I mean, I don't think any of this is happening by accident. I mean, I think that he has crafted this book. He did not just slop out some stuff on the page.
No, I hear what you're saying.
I just don't like it.
I think I was also not comfortable reading that, and I think it's very reminiscent of how it feels to be in those kinds of conversations. So
he is very good at what he does.
I guess that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, no, I mean, he's very good at what he does. Yeah.
Here's another example.
That doesn't mean you have to like the book.
Well, exactly. Yeah,
right.
I mean, I completely recognize that this is a very smart, clever book for sure. It just
and cleverness has, if you're too clever, sometimes it can be hard to.
Yeah, I mean, I think what I would love is like, and what the TV show does apparently, like it talks a lot about his past, like. I was getting into, like, the hard-boiledness of it when he's, like, meeting up with the 2 women that he sleeps with, and, like, he's staring out the window, and he's smoking a cigarette. Like, I wanted more of, like, how he felt, and it's very objective.
Yeah, so. You don't get to know him at all. So then at the end of the book, I was just like, well, all right. I mean, I just didn't feel attached to him. I wasn't rooting for him. I wasn't really rooting against him. I was just sort of taking in information. And I couldn't figure out if we're supposed to think he was a good detective or not. I didn't think he was a good detective, which is fine. Like, you don't have to write a book about someone who's good at their job or is a nice person or anything. But I do think you need to make it interesting. And I did not think he was interesting. And I thought he was actually a terrible detective because there were multiple instances where it was clear that someone who knew something was about to tell him something and he would interrupt them and change the subject. And I was just tearing my hair out. Like, there's a spot where he was talking to Yolanda, who's the friend of the dead woman that he's investigating. And Yolanda is telling him about how the victim, Mahalia, had made this city that doesn't really exist, Orsini, angry with her. And she says she knew she was in trouble. She said so just before she... And then he cuts her off and asks, well, why would they kill this other person, this third person? And it's like... Oh, and he does that when he's talking to the victim's parents
learn
too.
to listen.
Yeah, and I'm thinking like a detective of many, many years, and he has terrible interviewing skills. And he gives away Yolanda and ends up getting her killed. And he never grapples with that. There's never any like, oh my God, I made this mistake and I got Yolanda killed and my partner shot. Because he told Bowden, that professor, that Canadian professor who ended up being the one who was behind it all, he told him, I'm going to try to get Yolanda out at this date and time. And I remember when I was reading that and he was like, we'll pick you up and we'll take you too. And I remember when I was reading that, I was thinking, God, he didn't even tell his partner. He didn't tell Dot what they were doing until the very last second. Dot doesn't know what's going on until like it's go time and they're trying to get her out. But he calls that guy and is like, well, we need to get him out too. He's in danger. Well, okay, you believed that, but you just told him your whole plan, and then she gets shot and killed, and Dot gets shot and permanently injured.
Poor arm.
And that's what happened to him. That's how he ended up in Breach, and now he has to be one of these
Breach robots.
Breach ghouls.
And it was 100% his fault.
Do you know who we need? We need Mare of Easttown to go to Ulkuma.
Ulkuma. That's perfect.
Yeah,
that was good.
I've been waiting for that one. China Miéville said that he planned to write a novel in every genre of fiction.
I read that.
So, you know,
Maybe he's not good at the hard-boiled detective.
It's hard to be an Agatha Christie. As y'all know, I've never figured out a movie or book ending in my entire life. This was no surprise. This book was no different. I was like, oh, I guess that's the only other character we met, so that makes sense.
I also read, I don't know if it was in that same place where that came from, but it also said he wrote this basically for his mom because she really likes detective stories.
Oh, well, I did too. I like Agatha Christie.
Sorry you wrote your mom a shitty book, China. No, just kidding.
So the first like 50 pages I was very excited about. I was like, oh, it's a sci-fi Poirot novel. I was like flying through about the first 60 pages. And then I was like, okay. Because at the beginning of each chapter for about the first third of the book, there's like a 2-page info dump. And at the point where the narrator tells us, none of that really ever interested me. I was like, sir, why have you made me read all this? And you don't even think it's interesting. I got very frustrated after about 60 pages. And then I think the end picks up. But like the middle 100 pages, I was just
plot
like,
follows at the end for sure. Yeah. No, I mean, I am trying to be as positive as I can about this book. Because I do think it is an interesting idea.
Haley just out here doing the Lord's work.
I just didn't understand it. Y'all know I ain't good at reading. I don't know what happened at the end. I had to read a summary.
Yeah, if you're going to be glad in past details, this is not a good book. Because
you can't skip a single word.
Yeah. It's sort of like reading Hemingway or something.
Yeah.
It's like every word matters.
I would like to talk about Corwy, who is his female sidekick, who reminds me of Marcy from the Peanuts because she keeps calling him boss. Like sir. Like she calls Peppermint Patty sir. Like boss, hey boss, like twice in one sentence.
I love little Corwy.
Somebody told me that like they were so amazed at her character. I was like, she literally just says like, yes, sir.
No, wait, man, I love her character.
Tell me why.
I like her character too, but there's not much. She's not.
I wish she was in it more. I wish she was in it more.
Yeah, I mean, like I couldn't describe her emotionally to you at all.
Well, that's the same with Borlú. I mean, that's the same with all of them, really.
Yeah,
but like I like Corwy because she's sort of just quietly efficient. Like she does all the detective work. She's like Hermione. Like he would never have gotten as far as he did without her, right? And then when he goes to Ulkoma, he's kind of lost without her, and he keeps trying to call her. And like she's just
and their code too, which was cute.
Yeah, and she's just good at her job, and she's
Yeah, I agree with all that.
Yeah, I don't know. I like her, and she's like she's not any more respectful than she has to be, which I liked about her.
Well, yeah, they kept saying in reviews that she cussed a lot, but I apparently just glossed over every cuss word in this book. I don't remember.
You were unseeing the cuss words.
Apparently,
I didn't notice it either until I read it in a review, and then as I was going back at the places I had marked in the book, I noticed there was like 10 fucks per page.
Yeah.
10 fucks per page.
This guy fucks.
The per page fuck count.
That is okay. So I want to talk a little bit about how this became a tie, because that's interesting. It doesn't happen very often in the Hugo. So the other things that were nominated, maybe y'all have read them. I had read one other one. So City and the City and The Wind-Up Girl both win. Also nominated that year was Bone Shaker by Sherry Priest, Wake by Robert J. Sawyer, our BFF.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
I have not read that one. I did read Julian Comstock, A Story of 22nd Century America, which is like a fun post-apocalyptic, romp. And then Palimpsest by Catherine M. Valente, which I've not read either.
I haven't read any of those.
No, me neither.
Yeah, I guess they were like, both these books are so good, they both deserve it. Which I'm like, what? How bad were the other books?
Do I read? I haven't read any of those books.
I mean, I had only heard and read of one. The other three, I'd heard of one author. That was it. So I was wondering if y'all had any.
Yeah, I don't.
input.
I guess the Hugo. So the Hugo, once you become a finalist, people still vote, or is it up to the committee?
Oh, people still vote.
Okay,
Yeah.
so maybe they just tied in votes.
Yeah, I mean, I'm guessing that's what it is. But
Yeah.
but something happened in 2010 where like exactly half the amount of people from Bejel and Olcoma were like, we have to vote.
They had a simultaneous town hall, and
All the Miéville fans unsaw Wind-Up Girl, and all the Bacigalupi fans unsaw City in the City.
actually, that reminds me of one of my favorite things about the book. Okay, so you can only go to Olcoma from Bessel and vice versa by going through this building.
Platform 9 3/4.
Right, exactly. And, and at first blush, that seems kind of ridiculous, but I think that's actually pretty common, right? Like, you'll be driving along a border, and then you'll get to the place where you can actually go across the border legally, like when you're going to Mexico. Like, you can drive across.
You can walk across at any point.
I don't know. I felt like that grounded it more in reality to me than almost anything else in the book. It's like the idea of a border crossing was just very pedestrian. And so, like, I don't know.
Well, that's where I got confused, because I was like, well, is it just across the river?
No, I think it's just across. I think it's just across the street. Like, it's.
Yeah, no, I mean, I guess I don't. Okay, so here's the thing. I don't think visually or spatially well at all. So, like,
Yeah.
I couldn't picture this world.
The first time I read this book, I was completely freaking lost.
Yeah, I mean, I still am
This
lost,
time
yeah.
around, it was a little easier to
that's good.
gather what was going on. So I
There's some disagreement in the reviews that I read, though, because, as I have led with, I was confused about whether it's like mystically we're actually kind of in the same place or not. And I read some reviews that said that the cities were side by side with significant encroachment into each other. So like that there would be a lot of area that would be mostly Olcoma and mostly Bejel, and then they're sort of, as they say, cross-hatched. They're sort of interlocking, I guess.
Yeah.
Which makes it seem like that, if you say that by itself, it doesn't sound that ridiculous. But the idea that there are shared streets,
I don't get it. Like,
that makes it seem ridiculous. And also makes it seem really dangerous. Like, there are cars.
Here's how I picture it. It's like if you have, I have a pen in my mouth. If you have like an old European city center, right? Mm-hmm. And then like as the city grows and gets older, like you'll have planned out places outside in the suburbs, right? So I kind of picture of them having their own suburbs, but like as you get more towards like the middle bits, they overlap because they both sort of sprung out of that same area and grew. And so as you're in the older parts, you'll have streets that sort of crosshatch, I think, or they are the same street, just different names in the other city. Like they all using the same area. They're just calling them different things. They're going to different places, but then in the middle you have that big building, and that's how you go between.
but like there wouldn't be other people in this living room.
No, because the buildings are one place or another.
Well, that's where I get confused. Like they're sharing shared public space that's open.
Mm-hmm. Like there's park, like the dig they talk about, right? Is like, this big park, right? And so there's this dig, and the park itself, there are parts of it that are in Bessel, and then there's parts of it that are in Olcoma, and then there's parts of it that are kind of mushy, right?
I just don't get it.
So like some person can walk there from Bessel, and some person can walk there from Olcoma, and they just have to pretend like they're not there.
For a reason that we don't know why.
Exactly.
Yeah. I think I would do way better with this book if I had gotten less of the explanations that we did get and more of the, how did that happen? And how did Breach become in charge? Because one of the reviews that I saw rightly pointed out that Breach seems to have a lot of power, but then also not be very effective.
Well, think of ICE. It's like ICE goes and gets people who come here illegally. They have a lot of power, and they're not very effective.
Well, Amy, that was a very good analogy.
But I guess you don't become a part of ICE just because you come over here illegally. So,
But like
it's
they at
exactly
least
the
have
same.
like, but there's at least a reason behind ICE.
Yeah, I think it just at some point, some people mutually decided that the best thing to do was for these two things to live separately. Like they couldn't agree on something at some point, and so they split. And they all agree that they have to be apart, or I don't know, civilization will
Yeah,
form or something.
I guess I don't
just made that
do
up,
well
so.
with negative capability. Like I have to know the reasons why sometimes.
Ooh, good phrase. Negative capability.
I don't know what that means.
I like
term.
that.
It's like
I don't
the-
know what it means either.
It's
I like
the
it.
ability to like entertain two different thoughts in your mind at the same time, and I can't. Like I'm like either you're in Beshel or you're in here. Either they have a reason or they don't.
Well, then you do great in Beshel.
Yeah.
Because it's true. Like either you're in Beshel or you're not, right? And if you're not, then you're not.
But I would be like, this is bullshit. Like, why can't I see the building? And they'd be like, no, you don't. You unsee it. And I'm like, fuck you. No, I don't. I see it. Like,
Well, that's obviously like when we go, like if you go to the border of Mexico and Canada or whatever, like if you were walking along the border between East and West Berlin, you know, it's not like you can't see, and nobody ever in our world agrees that you can't see Berlin just because you're walking next to it, right?
exactly.
But there they, you know, that's the extreme you took it to.
And I think unsee is like you disregard it. So, and I think of it in the sense of like, well, I mean, and he is to some degree illustrating how we ignore homeless people or, you know, people who are in some kind of distress and we don't want to deal with it. It's like that. And I think of it as how when you oftentimes pull up on a, like an exit ramp and there's someone who wants to wash your windows
You're like, dude.
and you just like, I am aware that you're there, but I'm disregarding, you know, that kind of thing. And so that's how I understood unseeing to
Yeah,
work
same.
is more of a awareness, but I'm not going to acknowledge that I see this thing and not going to interact with it and see this person or this, you know, location. But in practice, the vehicle situation seems very dangerous, seems terrifying because you have to have an awareness, but not an active awareness of vehicles on a shared street. And then like Borlú has the Ulcoma like light rail is like running past his apartment and he like accidentally makes eye contact with someone on it and he's like, oh no.
Well, I mean, but I think even with that analogy, it comes down to like why I don't make eye contact is because either I don't have cash or I feel embarrassed or like there's a reason why like I'm choosing to unsee, whereas like here it's very arbitrary. And
Well,
I just want one sentence explaining why.
Do you respect country borders?
I don't really go to a lot of countries, so maybe not.
You do too, Haley. Get out of here.
The reason that they do it is so they don't get disappeared by breach, right?
Well, exactly,
like that's
but, like,
the reason.
And they've been raised to do
I know,
it.
but
That's
I
the
just-
other thing.
But I just want to know why.
if you had been raised to do a thing, you would do
Well,
it.
I agree
Well,
with
yeah,
you
of
that I
course.
want to know. I want to know like the root why, but I think the now why is so you don't get disappeared by breach, and nobody questions it really.
Well, I get that,
because they're you know they don't know they haven't. Well, I mean they do know other ways, but they've been brought up to immersed in it, and it is just the way, and they know how to do it.
Yeah.
I mean they recognize people based on their gait and posture and their like haircut and stuff.
That that brings me to the end of the book. Are we going to talk about the end of the book?
Yeah.
So
I'm still not sure what happened
at the end of the book. So at the end of the book, he finds out that the person who's like the culprit for all the murders and crap that's going on is this Professor Bowden. And Professor Bowden manages to evade the authorities by walking out of the one building where you can cross legally and walking down like the middle of a crosshatch street. So a street that both countries share. He's walking down the middle of it and he's somehow walking with both the gate of Beshel and the gate of Ukoma.
I thought he was doing neither.
Or neither.
Yeah.
So that neither one of them can be sure he's in their country. And if they're not sure he's in their country, then they can't arrest him. And so somehow he's going to escape the country by doing this.
And he's not in breach.
Right.
Because he's like, well,
He's like-
no one knows where I am, so they can't say I'm in
walking
breach.
that fine line.
So the police are afraid to interact with him because that would be a breach by them. Whew.
Spoiler.
Man, I
that
feel
was
like
my soap stuff. Spoiler.
Talking
Yeah.
about it makes me like it a little better because it is like so absurd and surreal without being supernatural. If we, take that tack that it's not supernatural.
It's very clever.
For a while, I was thinking that was stupid that he would be walking down the street using
not stupid.
a gate. No, like just that he would be using some gate that would make him that wouldn't mark
Neutral.
him as one. But then I was thinking about like when I go to France, like there's a way French people walk around that you cannot, like you can't quite mimic because you're from America and you walk differently.
Oh yeah, I had a Israeli coworker at Starbucks who commented on how Americans walk,
Isn't that crazy?
and I was like, "People walk in ways," and he was like, "Yeah, people walk in ways."
It's true. Like, people walk in ways. I don't know. It's like, it's very hard to like pinpoint, but I think it's absolutely true.
Oh, yeah. I mean, yeah, no argument there.
So this is an interesting but not entertaining book, I would say, for me.
I think that's accurate. I feel the same, actually.
It was not fun.
Right.
Like, I finished this all last night, and I was like, I'm spending my Saturday night struggling through this book. But again, he's smart. It's very clever. He's done everything on purpose. I totally get it. It intellectually makes sense.
like it.
Yeah.
I thought about asking you to come over and watch Elvira with me last night. Maybe I should have done that.
I read all this and then went to sleep. So.
Elvira is a good movie. You should watch it if you haven't seen it.
We're talking about that yesterday.
Haley, I don't think you've read this, but Amy, I think maybe you have. Have you read Neverwhere by Neil Gaiman?
I have.
Okay, so this made me think of that, except that that's a lot more fun.
Agreed.
It's the same kind of a whole separate world can exist within a world because we just choose not to look at it. Mm-hmm. And there, it's more of a marginalization kind of thing where we don't know about London below because we see aspects of London below and are like, eek, homeless person or weird person and look away from it. But so there is this whole other city within the city of London. And it's actually all like supernatural and very interesting.
You know, the wizarding world overlaps our world.
Yeah. Yeah. It is like that.
But I
as
think
well.
they have magic to make us not see it, so that's different.
Yeah, they like hide it away.
Yeah.
Muggles don't go into
Neverwhere's
Diagon
a much
Alley.
better
Yeah,
analogy.
Neverwhere is not, they're not hiding.
Yeah.
They're in plain sight and we just don't look at them.
It's the same thing happened in American Gods. They just blend. That's different too.
Yeah, they're also trying to hide. But I think in Neverwhere, they're not really trying to hide.
I think you're right. Yeah.
So it reminded me of that, only Neverwhere's more fun.
It is more fun. You're right.
Okay, boob talk. Do y'all have anything?
Well, I wanted to read this quote, actually.
Oh, yeah, please do.
I read a review for The Guardian that Michael Moorcock wrote, and Michael Moorcock is like blurbed on every single book that we've read. And he says, subtly, almost casually, Miéville constructs a metaphor for modern life in which our habits of, quote, unseeing allow us to ignore that which does not directly affect our familiar lives. And I just liked that. Even though I didn't love the book, I liked that take on it.
He definitely accomplished that.
Yeah. For boob talk, I made a note that there were 0 boobs in the book. Like,
There's
this
no
guy
boobs.
it's like a sexless book.
Yeah.
Except for he does reference Theodore has these 2 lovers. Mm-hmm. And he says they don't know about each other, but if they did, they wouldn't care.
Yeah.
Which I appreciated.
Yeah.
And then they talk to a lot of sex workers in the beginning of the book. And yet it was all entirely sexless.
Yeah. It was like
remarkable.
It was like a Ken doll, this book.
It was a Ken doll.
There's no desire
Smooth
for
like
it.
a Ken doll.
Yeah.
I wanted to mention somewhere, too, that I think Borlú is such an asshole to Dot. When he first picks him up from the, city port, and he gets in the car, and he's like, do you prefer Tiad or Theodore? Like, do you want a nickname? Are you John or Jonathan?
Yeah.
And he just doesn't answer him. He just starts talking about something else. And then Dot goes,
So
you call me Dot, you call me Kuss, either one's fine, it's fine. And he's just like he's just like,
yeah,
not
he's
nice.
such a little diva when he goes over to
He
Old Coma.
really,
He really
is such a diva. And he, as we later find out, has no business being such a diva.
No. I mean, all of his advances in investigating the case either come from tips that fall in his lap
Yeah.
or Corey.
Corey doing like the hard
Yes.
pushing paper.
And yet he feels like he could go over to Old Coma and just feel like his shit doesn't stink and not tell Dad his nickname and sneak out of the hotel. And
What do you go by? Like, what do I call you?
T-Bone. Wait, what does he become when he becomes an avatar of Breach?
Ty.
Ty.
Oh, it's so funny how Breach, like, you basically get like a nickname of the name that you had.
Yeah. One of my first crushes was named Ty.
I mean, that's a fine name to have. It's just funny that they're like, oh no, you have the shortest version of your name now.
He was talking to me until I fell down at a football game.
That's embarrassing.
I need to talk to him anymore.
Oh my God.
I know.
High school.
Misogynist
Middle
moment.
school.
Oh yeah.
Oh, middle school.
You
They
can't
should just
fuck up
call it
once.
We were at one of those
misogynist
BC
moment
games.
school.
I fell down the ramp up to the stadium seats.
You fell up the stairs?
I fell down the ramp.
All right. I'm on Ty's side here. All
I
right.
mean, fair.
Misogynist moment. There's not a ton. It's not too bad in this book, but another dead woman ?
I wrote
Yeah.
the same thing. I was
Yeah.
like,
Two dead
another
women.
dead girl.
Oh.
I will say, at least she was killed for being smart.
Yeah.
That's where she's punished.
Yeah. I also, in a feminist favor, it's like, I'm glad there's a smart professor named Dr. Nancy, and I guess Corey is a good cop.
I like Dr. Nancy because she has 2 first names like me.
Yeah, Isabel Nancy.
My feminist favorite is when he first meets Yolanda, and about 7 seconds into meeting Yolanda in her hideout where she's trying to not get murdered, where she was successfully not getting murdered.
Until he took her out of her hideout.
And he says, "Do you trust me?" And she just goes, "No." And the whole, it's just no, period. And I was like, yes,
No.
you shouldn't. Because I feel like there is a lot of like just trusting the savior man or trusting the police in fiction. And she was just like, no, of course I don't. You just like busted into my hideout. You've blown my cover.
I don't know you,
I
sir.
don't know you. Yeah, no. So I gave that a feminist favorite for a woman
that's
giving
good.
an unequivocal no.
Fuck politeness. Good job, Yolanda.
Do y'all have any soap stuff?
My soap stuff was all the was the walking down the middle of the street with no gate, but all the gates, but also I don't know, it was a big moment.
Yeah, I don't really.
But also finding Mahalia's book in the library was kind of ridiculous to me because it's like
So many marginalia.
she hides this book with all this marginalia on a library shelf, and somehow it has never been moved or altered or anything.
Oh yeah, and somehow he like deduces that that's a thing that she would do.
It's at the library. I just know it. Like,
That's
come on.
very that's very Dan Brown book. Da Vinci Code. That's very Da Vinci
Yes,
Code.
it was very Da Vinci Code. And like, it's like suddenly this cop who has no insight whatsoever has this big flash of insight, and he goes to the library and finds this book. It's like, come on. And has all the answers in it.
For my culinary corner, I think there's a couple of
Culinary
mentions.
corner. Did we start calling it culinary corner?
I forget.
That's
Fantastical
fine.
foods.
I have fantastical food, but there are no rules.
I was just worried I forgot.
No, I definitely forgot. I was just like, I was like, what's alliteration? Fantastical foods. So I think there's a couple of brief mentions of beverages in this, and I think that gives it a little bit of humanity. So like at one point he mentions going someplace, asking questions and sharing really bad coffee, and I was like, everyone knows what that means.
Yes.
There's lots of mention of thick tea, which I like, and then he mentioned cinnamon lentils, which I would try.
That was like, there was to differentiate kind of between Beshel and Ulcoma, he mentions that Beshel has like these steamed dumplings and Ulcoma has like cinnamon spiced lentils, which it does make it draws a line in your head.
Yeah, like at a certain point, it's like, oh, this is a human being man.
Right.
That is doing a case study, but yeah.
Well, right after he goes on his or when he goes on his walkabout with Ashiel, his breach captor, and he's hungry, and he takes him to get Besh dumplings, and since
favorite.
they're in breach, they can go to another shop and get Ulcoman soda, I think. Don't they? Does
something
he
like
get
that.
or a drink or something?
Orange
so-
juice, I think.
Yeah, and he's just like very freaked out. He's like, I got these Besh dumplings and this Ulcoman drink, and he's like, "You're in breach. It's fine. You can do whatever you want." And then like you say that, and it's like, well, it seems
Why
like
doesn't
there's-
everybody want to be
Yeah,
in breach?
it seems like there's a certain freedom in breach,
And it doesn't seem like he's leaving much behind, so why
That's
not
like
just be in breach?
Getting a Wendy's burger and McDonald's fries.
I know, right?
Can I tell you something that was so funny to me? So when there's a breach that happens, and breach, who are the law enforcement, they also call themselves breach, they show up and they just start saying breach,
Breach.
breach, breach. And it made me think of the seagulls. They go, mine, mine, mine. I imagine all these like Hugo Weaving from The Matrix. Did I get the actor's name right?
yeah,
Okay.
Mr. Smith.
Yeah. Mr. Smith from The Matrix. A bunch of him showing up in their
Yes,
dark suits and
that's
dark glasses
exactly
going,
what I thought of
breach,
breach.
breach, 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 breach.
I will say to
Malkovich.
on the side of it being like supernatural or something, whenever breach shows up, people always talk about how they can't see them very well, which is weird. Like somehow they manage to like exist in your like periphery, even though they're right in front of you or something. That definitely goes to it being supernatural or something.
Yeah, who knows?
It's kind of like, it's a little bit like thought policey too, because that's what they're doing. Like if you don't actively unsee, which is like a voluntary thing you do in
How
your
the
brain.
hell would they know?
How would they
Yeah.
know? So it would have to be somewhat supernatural.
And they don't act like people. Like they just show up and are breach, 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 breach. I mean, that's and like you would think
They're wearing their like gray North Korea clothes.
a person would be like, "You are in breach. Come with me." But instead, they're just like breach, 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 breach. And then you wake up in a cell.
Well, yeah, and in my brain, the breach headquarters was like the headquarters from Beetlejuice that the dead people go to. I was like, I don't know what to picture. Like, I just wanted more adjectives and like
Do y'all remember when
primary sources.
Y'all remember when Kate Winslet was in that Divergent movie or whatever, and she was wearing that nice gray, or was she in?
I
Crap.
haven't seen that.
She wasn't in Hunger Games. I saw some of the Divergent. They're similar.
I'm pretty sure she was in charge of one of the things in Divergent. She was wearing this nice gray outfit, and that's what I pictured the breach in.
The funniest thing about the Divergent people is that they're Ravenclaw and Hufflepuff houses. One is just the kids that are like, I like to jump off of trains. Like, there's like the people that like to cook. There's like the people that are like daredevils that jump off of shit. And that was like one of your like houses. And I was like, oh God.
It was such a weird.
It was very blatantly a Hunger Games ripoff.
Yes. Oh, bless.
And then for Star Wars versus Lord of the Rings, guys.
Did you like it?
Did I like it? I did not have pleasure reading this book.
Yeah, not really. I wouldn't have finished it. I
100%.
don't think it's a bad book, but it wasn't for me.
He's good at what he does.
I liked it more before we talked.
I like it a little better after
that's
we
what
talked.
Funny, we're all coming together.
I was trying not to be negative about this because that's no fun.
I do think I was being a little too defensive of it in my head while I was reading it because I read it when I was young. Like I read it when I was 21, right? And so, books never hit as hard as they did when you read them when
That's
you're 21.
for sure, yeah.
And so I had this warm fuzzy connection to like reading it in England and like
that's
loving
great.
it and da-da-da-da-da. But it's true. There are definitely some problems.
I mean, it's not even the problems. I don't like the way that it was written. And it's just a personal thing. Like, I need a little more humanity to make it feel real.
Well, it's like he skimmed the top of a noir, right?
Yes.
Which
And
I already don't like. Like, I don't read mysteries ever. So.
And I do like mysteries.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't read them that often, but I like them. And I was trying to think of like what separates this from like a Sam Spade type mystery or whatever. And you really do it's because you do start to see the detective as a person with flaws. And all this. And he never really, like his characterization just really lacks.
Well, and I read reviews that were like, he did that on purpose. He's an empty slate.
I don't know.
Which is a great argument, but I don't buy it. Like,
but I know that he can humanize his characters because he does
absolutely.
it in other books.
Yeah.
So
Or like if he did it on purpose, that's fine. It just doesn't resonate with every reader.
Yeah. Again, like I will applaud him for what he did. He did a good job of what he was aiming to do, it seems like. So
I said before, like he doesn't, I think I should be clear. Like I don't think every main character has to be a good person or good at what they do or like a nice person. But I just don't know anything about him. And you would think like as hard as he worked to try to solve this case, because he did, he was obviously very dedicated, that you would see some emotional grappling with the fallout of his errors. I don't.
I mean, it's like he's completely like morally tabula rasa or something.
Yeah.
Like
well,
he's just
he was giving up his career by going into Breach too. He's giving up his life, which we know nothing about besides the two lovers.
Or is it the ultimate promotion, Haley?
I don't know.
He gets to do nothing but investigate for the rest
now
of his
he
life.
can get a Ulcoman juice and
Anytime he wants.
Besh dumpling. So there's definitely a certain freedom in there.
Yeah.
There was a review I read that said, beautiful prose, empty book.
I wouldn't even call it beautiful.
No, I found the syntax very frustrating.
Hard prose, brilliant concept, not Haley's favorite execution.
Yep.
But that's all.
I think I definitely enjoyed reading it more than it sounds like you guys did, but I definitely wouldn't say it's my favorite book of all time, I guess.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I would hope this is not your favorite book of all time.
It's definitely not. My favorite book of all time is Jonathan Strange and Mr. No, I'm just kidding.
Again, so this book, that book, Neil Gaiman, I'm trying to identify a theme of books that I don't resonate with, and I think it is things that are oh so clever.
Again, like you
Which is
can
funny.
definitely be too clever.
Which is funny because I feel like I'm a clever person and I appreciate wit and smartness, but I want to like live in a world, I guess.
And see, I feel like Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, there's nothing you can do but live in that world. Like it's so...
Well, that world I just don't like. So,
okay.
yeah.
Anyway.
But her was more like the writing style too.
Yeah.
The footnotes and whatnot.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. Because I don't really consider this fantasy or sci-fi, which is interesting.
It's new weird.
I don't know. What is that? Is that a
That's
thing?
what he identifies, but he said he is part of the new weird.
Okay.
I'm using real hard air quotes when I say this, but new weird.
It's just so
genre.
funny because I like that other book because like that was doing really fun things like language in a way that like Annihilation did. It was like, let me think about words brand new. So
I did like the word, the word gross topically and the word doppelganger. I actually thought were pretty clever in a not offensive way. I
was
liked
very clever.
doppelganger was an interesting concept to me, like that you could be in a place and it could be two things at once, but they shared the same space, which I just thought was interesting. But like the park or whatever.
yeah. No, I mean, I wasn't bothered by the neologisms, but there was at least 5 times that I had to dictionary a word, and that never happens in my normal life. I was like, what?
Okay, I've got one more example of writing that I really didn't like that I want to share.
Well, because it's hard to explain. Because I remember texting Lori about it. Because I was like,
Why am I not on these group texts?
Because we knew that you like it, and we didn't want to be
shit.
pooping on it. to
Yeah.
you.
It's okay if you poop on it.
But we could save it for this. I just didn't want to lead with like, Amy, we're not gonna like talking about it, and we felt bad.
I was trying my best to be positive during this because I almost threw the book across the room once.
Oh, really? I've done that before.
Yeah.
Okay, so Dot took what's his name, Borlú, to a police bar in Ilcoma, and he says, where he took me, comma, a place very close to his office, comma. Which, why doesn't he just say, he took me to a place very close to his office?
I kept rewriting things in my head.
Right.
Yeah.
But, okay, let me, okay.
I did that to N.K. Jemisin.
Where he took me, a place very close to his office, was not as dark as a cop bar in Bejel would have been. It was more salubrious. I still would not have booked a wedding reception there. Okay. Did anyone ask you to find a wedding venue?
And also,
Now that you're reading it, I realize I do not know what salubrious
Healthy.
means.
It means
It means healthy.
well, a detective would. My dad was a detective. He would never say salubrious.
Right. So
He would say not fucked up. Like he wouldn't say.
He'd be like, oh, it's a lot cleaner here.
Was your dad a detective?
He was a homicide detective. Yeah.
Interesting.
He was the lead homicide. He was the chief of the homicide department in Savannah for
I
5
didn't
years.
realize
Yeah. Yeah. So having lived with a detective, they don't use 50-cent words.
Well,
Yeah.
I read that and I was like, I need a break.
I need to throw this across the
I
room
had
for
a
now.
dictionary. I'm using it as a verb.
I need
It's like reach.
I need a dictionary, comma.
I'm talking like the protagonist now. I mean, like, there was one, like, species of plant that I never heard of, and all I do is identify species of plants all day long with the Sea Cap by National Geographic. Yeah, no, I guess I don't. Okay, here's the thing. So I consider myself to be a very smart person, but books like these make me feel dumb.
Interesting.
Because I never know what's going on. I don't like to be dropped into a world.
Maybe that's the books you don't like. The books that you feel like are trying to make you feel dumb.
Yeah, and that's my ego being bruised. But like,
Well,
I like.
it's also a weird way to approach writing a book. To try like there are books that can be smart without it feeling like it's trying to make you feel dumb, like it's attacking you.
Yeah. I think it's because reading is my one of my primary hobbies where I get the most pleasure from the world. I do it every single day of my life, and like I like to have it be pleasurable. And like some people, like I have an ex that was an English professor that she really liked books that were like this, like, you didn't know what was going on at first. You had to like claw your way to the top of it. But I was like, oh no, please give me like I Am Born, I Am David Copperfield.
I think I do like books like that. I mean, I think there's sort of a season for everything, right? But I there are definitely times when I appreciate a book that like challenges you.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, it's just
This one, he definitely had the thesaurus on hand.
Well, yeah, and like
Now that you're mentioning things like that, it's like, well, that's okay. You can use those words if you want, but it actually doesn't make much sense for the story you're writing.
It was more salubrious. Why didn't you just say
Yeah.
like, oh, the floor's not sticky?
Yeah.
That's what you mean. You mean the
Yeah.
floor's not sticky, the light bulbs aren't burned
absolutely
out.
true.
and
Yeah.
all that does is create a cooler picture. Like he could have gone into like a paragraph diatribe about like his favorite dive bar in Beige, and I would have loved that.
Yeah.
Like, and then I would have been like, oh, this is what Beige is. Beige, like there's like stale beer and there's like raw onions on the floor. Like just like anything would have made it like a little more human, I guess. So
Yeah, yes.
like I would love to read a historical fiction book about Beige. Like that would be cool.
It's a travel guide, Haley. You can go to this bar in Oklahoma that is not salubrious, or that is more
I know.
salubrious.
It is not
But
salubrious.
still not wedding worthy.
Yeah.
Don't book your wedding there.
But also, like, we have no idea that would he like going to weddings? We have no idea. Fascinating.
Well, he has 2 lovers, so I don't think he's into weddings.
I wonder if he was hot.
He sounds hot to me. He sounds, you know who he sounds like? And it's only, I think, because I was recently watching it, was, have you guys watched The Expanse?
No.
Have you watched?
I've seen a couple episodes.
Have you watched that show? Okay, so you know who plays the detective guy?
Oh, yeah. He wears that fedora.
That's who this reminds me of. I think he's cute.
You know what? For a couple of minutes, I was like, I'm going to pretend that Borlú is a woman. And I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. Like
That's interesting.
Because, like, you could be whoever you want in a book. Like, you could make him tall, you could make him short, you could make him whatever ethnicity you wanted. And I tried for a minute, and I couldn't get away. Like, there's just something very masculine about the character, and I just could not get away. I also never understand politics in any book, because I barely understand American politics. So I was like, nationalists and unificationists, that cider guy.
Oh, I got this.
Please explain.
Do you want to know? So you have Bessel and Ilcoma, and they either split or joined. They don't know which one, right? And then you've got people who live in Bessel who are nationalists, who want Bessel to be split. Like they want there to be like a demarcation and not be together with Ilcoma anymore. And there's people in Ilcoma who feel the same. And then there's people on both sides who want it just to be one country and stop. Those are the
That would be the
unificationists.
easiest solution, I would argue.
And then there's
No kidding.
Bowden, who believes really hard in this Orsini idea, which is this third country that exists in the interstices between the two countries.
Which made no sense to me.
He believes really hard in it, and he somehow gets caught up in this selling of artifacts from the dig where Mahalia, this archaeological dig where Mahalia works. He gets caught up in selling artifacts out of there to some special people because he's just disillusioned and is.
Well, he doesn't believe in Orsini anymore.
Oh, but he does, I think.
You think so?
Doesn't he say? Because isn't the whole reason he killed Mahalia because Mahalia told him that his theory was bunk?
I thought it was because she figured out it was bunk.
Yeah, and then he was going to get in trouble.
Because he couldn't keep scamming her because
okay.
he had made her think she was working for Orsini stealing these artifacts.
Oh, interesting. So that's interesting. Because the way I read that was like Theodore told him that he killed her. Well, we never really hear from Bowden in this because Theodore's just talking like a man. but he tells Bowden that the reason he killed Mahalia was because he got like challenged, her. She said
I
it
didn't
wasn't
understand
real.
that. So you
But I think
could be absolutely right.
No,
I don't
think,
understand it.
Now that you say that, though, I think your theory sounds righter.
I just thought she was threatening to torpedo this money situation where he was selling these artifacts to the people in Brazil, and that Orsini was basically his bait for her. And then she figured out that he was tricking her.
She was going to take away the money, the cash cow.
I think so.
That's
but
a much more reasonable reason to kill someone.
I genuinely did not understand everything that was happening at the end, so I could be wrong.
Yeah, this just gave me an idea. Instead of fan fiction, so I never understand any murder mystery. I'm like, what? How did they think of this? I think it'd be funny if I tried to come up with a murder mystery.
Yes, Haley, yes.
It wouldn't make any sense.
I want to read that so
I don't know
bad.
what I would do because
The red Narantil knife.
because I don't know how you've got to start at the end, right? And then work backwards. Like, I don't know how anybody would come up with a plot for a murder. Like, I don't know.
Haley, do it.
I'd be like, I killed him because he done slept with my wife.
Haley, do it. Listen, you guys know I read like 7,000 Agatha Christie books.
It's an
and
art form.
They're so good, and I never know who did it. And
Never.
there's definitely a little bit of a formula to them, and I
100%,
still never
It's
know
always-
who did it.
Yeah.
They're so good. And you know what I'll go ahead and say? I've listened to a lot of Sherlock Holmes stories on audio, and I usually know who did it. Agatha Christie rolls up and is like,
Nope.
oh, it was this neighbor that you met. Or sometimes it is the person who it seems like it was. And you're like, it couldn't be her. That's too obvious. And then it was. I mean, they're so good. She's so good at the twist.
Yeah.
As you know, all I watch is Criminal Minds. And I can tell you that you always know who did it in Criminal Minds because it's the most famous guest star.
I trying to remember where I saw this once, but there were some famous murderers once, and y'all are more about murder than I am. But these two people in like the 60s, I want to say, and this could all be wrong. They became obsessed with the idea of conducting the perfect murder where no one would ever get away with it, and like, I think that's an intriguing idea because like nowadays everything is like you have your phone, you got credit card receipts, and like the idea of like driving somewhere and doing a perfect murder then leaving and never getting caught is, I guess people became obsessed with that idea.
Got to use an ice pick. That's the trick.
Write it.
I'm gonna write it. I'm gonna write the perfect murder. It's gonna be so bad.
Never having understood a murder in my life.
Never.
I'm gonna write them.
Space murder.
Everyone's gonna be like, on page 1, it was the butler.
Just kick him out an airlock. Nobody will be able to solve it.
Space murder. Okay, so yeah, that brings me to, is this Star Wars or Lord of the Rings? And I was like, I don't, neither.
The Da Vinci Code.
Is the maybe that's our third option going forward.
I mean,
There's no journey, really, unless...
yeah.
Oh,
There's
it's
no
like
hero.
it's like the prequels. It's like all about trade.
Trade. Politics.
Yeah.
It is the Star Wars prequels.
This is the Phantom Menace. There's the city's a phantom.
Is it the Silmarillion?
There's good stuff in there, but it's kind of boring. It's not great. The dialogue is very stilted.
Oh,
it's the
it's so
prequels.
stilted.
It's the prequel.
I
It's
hate
Star Wars.
sand.
It's Star Wars.
It's everywhere. It's coarse and it's rough.
It's not salubrious.
not
I wouldn't book a wedding in this sand.
But there's still like, the origins of Darth Vader. No, never mind.
There are things to like.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's the prequels.
He did a good job.
He did exactly what he set out to do.
I give him an A for effort.
You listeners, chime in whether you think it's Star Wars or Lord of the Rings.
Or the Da Vinci Code.
Or is it, I don't know, a murder book.
Oh, let's hear you try, though.
Murder on the Orient Express.
That's a murder book.
There we go.
Very good book. That book is so good. And that's not even a funny one. So a lot of the mysteries, the Hercule Poirot, or I guess Hercule Poirot. You know, I'm born bad at French, so I don't know. Poirot.
You're very English. It's okay.
I know, that's why I can only digest potatoes. But those books where he has this friend Hastings is the narrator, and those are always funny because they have this little like dynamic between them that's very comical. And the ones where he's not are kind of darker. And Murder on the Orient Express is one that's kind of darker, and it's so good.
Is there good characterization in those books?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah,
She's really good at characters.
What I was thinking about when Borloo was responsible for Yolanda's death and Dot's maiming, and I was thinking to myself, Poirot would be just devastated that he had exposed someone to getting shot and killed. He would be devastated. And Borloo, like, I mean, he is like, by whatever means necessary, I'm going to get this guy. Mm-hmm. But I just don't, you don't ever see him being like, oh my God. And he spends all that time in his cell. He's got lots of time to think. And we never see him being like, I messed up.
Even if he ate dumplings 2 more times, that would have been like, maybe he's a little pudgy and he like is trying hard.
Or if we saw him in an actual scene with one of his lovers or something.
Yeah, like
something.
Like as I went back to look for notes today, like there's a scene where he's like, you know, how she called him mawkish. Well, again, another fucking 50-cent word for looking out the window, staring like Jack Donaghy.
I don't know what mawkish means.
Like sentimental and like hokey. Again, these are all SAT words. So if you're studying for the SAT, give your kid this book. Yeah, so like I like that. So I was like, okay, we're going to wind it up. I want more hard boiled. I want more trench coats. I want more. That at one point it says that he was going to get he was not going to start smoking again, and he was taking a lot of mints, and it was giving him sugar blisters. So I was like, okay, so he's got a vice, and he's fighting against it. And then nothing else is said about him for the rest of the book. So
I think my favorite Agatha Christie mystery with Hastings is the one where he first appears, and it's called The Mysterious Affair at Styles.
Ooh.
And it is so good.
Harry Styles? No.
I listened to Phoebe Reads a Mystery. So Phoebe from Criminal, the podcast.
This is Criminal, and I'm Phoebe Judge.
Her voice is so good. And she started reading a chapter a day of a mystery that was like public domain during the pandemic.
I listened to one of them.
She probably did not expect she would be doing that for this long. She was like, oh, I'll read this little Agatha Christie novel, and then I'll just go back to my regular job. Nope, she is still reading books.
Damn.
But anyway, I was listening to it, and I was like laughing out loud at some of it. It's so funny because Hastings, like, the conceit is kind of like that he's not that smart.
Oh, he's a himbo.
Yeah, kind of. It's so good. So if anybody wants some easy reading, those are great.
All right, what's next?
The next book is All Systems Red by Martha Wells.
Yeah.
That is the first Murderbot novel, right?
Correct.
Or novelette?
It's like
novella?
a novella.
Yeah, I think it won Best Novella.
It's pretty short. Yeah.
Should have looked that up. Sorry.
We'll get it right next time, guys.
Yep.
Don't at us.
When we introduce it, we'll get it right. But do rate, review, and subscribe.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I'm Amy.
I'm Haley.
And I'm Lori.
This has been Hugo Girl.
Bye.